All right, all right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Friday, May 10th, which is Mother's Day weekend.
It's true.
It's
Uh,
exciting. Don't forget your moms.
it is true. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead, call your moms. Get your wives and grandmas presents, all that good stuff, guys. Do the right thing.
And it
Um,
and it feels
fun
like
fact-
from Colorado to Missouri, finally our weather's breaking. Finally.
yeah, you guys sent some of the bad stuff our way for whatever reason. But yeah, it should be okay. We got a few open houses this weekend for our team here, and some people that are going to be out shopping. So I don't think it's supposed to not rain. So we'll see. But it's going to be a little cloudy, which is fine. Hey, come take a break from the cloudy weather, coming in, see some open houses, go look at some stuff. Should be a good weekend. But
Yeah.
Mother's Day weekend, Rockies are playing, Abs are back in town. They split away. So hopefully we can kind of get it done at home and keep on trucking through the Stanley Cup playoffs here, and that'd be great. Yeah,
Nice. Well, a topic today. So, clearly we've got this proposed National Association of Realtors and the DOJ settlement. We've
mhm.
got, we wanted to kind of give a little bit of an update on where we are there now and what we know today. And then as we move forward, we'll plan on having regular updates to provide some clarity, not only if you're watching this on YouTube or social media or listening to the podcast, either one. But high level, so the verdict was in October of last year
Correct.
in the Missouri courts. Through that, 1.7, 1.8 billion, and then it was in triplicate. But right now, we've got roughly 13 companies. These would be national large brands that have got a proposed settlement of $971 million. Of that number, there's 84 companies that fall outside of the NAR proposed settlement that had a dollar volume in 2022. I think it was 2 billion or more.
Mhm.
Of that 84, three of them are in Colorado,
Mhm.
and one of them is in Missouri. So of the 84, four of them fall within our territory. There is a path for them to opt in. There's a math formula for them to opt in. I would suspect coming into maybe by Memorial Day, but I would say in the month of June, we're going to know what that looks like for those companies. I think we're going to have to.
They have by mid-June, I want to say, like the 16th or
I,
17th date that's in my
I
head.
think you're right. And I
Mhm.
think the practice changes for the National Association of Realtors proposed settlement has been moved to August 8th, August 17th. So it
Mhm.
bought us another 30 days to work through some of this.
Mhm.
However, what's interesting is the final court date for the whole thing is on November 26th after Thanksgiving.
Correct.
So there is going to be a lag between the two. Um, so essentially, as realtors, and MLSs will implement the practice changes mid to late August, well ahead of that final court date, assuming those dates all stay in line.
Mhm.
The interesting thing, though, as we've been talking with our teams in Colorado and Missouri, we're already there. Both states have a buyer agency requirement. We're there. We've had it for 20 plus years in Colorado. I'm going to guess 15 plus years in Missouri. We already have it. Now, there's some practice changes around it that will be implemented clearly as we come, like the MLS compensation,
Mhm.
also the upfront, especially for those people that we don't know yet.
Right.
Like we get a sign call or there was a phone call, somebody drove by, things like that. So we're going to have to slow that roll a little bit and
Mhm.
put that into some sort of an agreement of some sort, right?
Yeah.
Now, the positive is we met with the Missouri team yesterday, and one of the things we talked about is we're already doing it now, right? We're
Mhm.
practicing it today as if the rule change already happened. We're trying to get ahead of this thing and stumble through it a little bit. Honestly, it's a very natural conversation as long as you explain it. There's been a
Right.
couple of stumbles, there's been a couple
Sure.
of them, but for the most part, we're not waiting to see what happens, right? Also, that being said, our amazing team, and I'll give you some shout out, Andrew. Thank you to you and Nicole in Colorado and Jerry, our transaction coordinator and our admin. I've been working on, we have our seller presentation, which is now finished. We're now beginning the buyer presentation
Mhm.
and building that resume about us and all the things that we do. And then also, most of us are going to be taking the accredited buyer representative course in June, which is a 12-hour certification. So I think once we get past that, we should be able to finish our buyer piece and then we should be off to the races.
Correct. I definitely want to say, I do appreciate, the folks over at CAR for putting that class on complimentary for our realtors out here in the state of Colorado. To my knowledge, it's never been complimentary before. So I think that, them rising and providing that extra benefit in a time when it's going to be really of need is really great, right? And to our, to our potential clients out there that maybe, watching this video, I appreciate your time, but it's okay to ask your agent if they have pursued any of these certifications, right? Because there a lot of people in my experience, and I think we're all guilty of it at some point, kind of think of our CE credits, especially our electives, as like a box check. We'll take something that might be interesting, like a 1 credit or 2, 3 credit free offering from a title company or a lender. Not that those aren't important, because there's certainly good skills and knowledge that can be brought out of that, but it's highly variable. But if you're like, putting a little bit of money and time behind it and putting more commitment, pursuing something like the accredited buyer representative or a certified negotiation expert, a short sale and foreclosure certification, some of these things that cost a little more time, a little more money, I think can be a really good thing to pursue as our agents, and a really good thing to consider when you're considering kind of the quality of the agent that you want to work with when you're out there in the public. So just want to say that out there, but there's definitely a lot to talk about today. So we talked about kind of a few bullet points there. I guess, let's kind of work through them in reverse. We talked about kind of the accredited buyer certification. I think that's going to be a really great tool. I'm really happy that, I think, to my knowledge, our entire team is pursuing it. So that's really great. It's not a requirement, obviously, but I think it's a really good thing to pursue and try to keep your sword sharp and better yourself. Obviously, as we work through some of these changes, there's some things that sometimes changes happen, and policies change before we really understand how they're going to function, right? And I think there's going to be a little bit of a time here across all 50 states where there's going to be an adjustment between, like, our trade group, in this case NAR, and our MLS is where we advertise property, because like, hey, we are implementing these new requirements, right? And there might be some pain and some adjustment period as we figure out how to adjust to that and how we dance with, especially the state level requirements for doing so, right? So I think a really salient example would be the Zillow like tour document that got produced recently. I don't know how many of you guys saw that. Essentially, what it was is Zillow was trying to do what we're all trying to do, trying to dance with this, this new requirement out of NAR that says you have to have a signed buyer's agency agreement or something to that effect before you can show anyone any property, starting when they produced it July 1, and now it's going to be August 17th, right? Again, a good practice always, right? If we go back to real estate school, we were all taught to do that. So I don't think anyone can say this is a surprise, right? So we were all taught to do that. But from a practicality perspective, it was a difficult conversation to kind of introduce yourself to someone. It's like, hey, before I do anything for you, I need to have this contract rule agreement that established our relationship before I can go show you property, right? And because that was a tough conversation, and because it wasn't required, it kind of ended up being a thing that didn't happen very frequently. We would, you had different models. Some people would run all the way up to the right an offer and then have the buyer's agency agreement and the contract executed at the same time, right? Which is probably the one of the reasons why we got in trouble, because now you're putting buyers in a situation where they're like on a time crunch to submit an offer. They're signing a document, maybe they're not fully reading. So I can understand why that was a bad practice, right? All the way to some people had an example of like, hey, like the first hit's free kind of a thing where like, hey, maybe opening weekend, maybe they're not even pre-approved yet. We know we're not going to write an offer in this current situation. Let's go look at a couple houses. We'll grab a coffee or beer afterwards, talk with the process, get you in front of your lender, sign your buyer's agency agreement, we're off to the races, right? So obviously, certainly better, than the first example I laid out, but not optimal, and not what we were all trained to do. So now basically what NAR and the MLSs are saying is you're just going to do what every single real estate class in the country has been teaching you to do for the last couple decades here, right? So is it going to be awkward? Are we going to have to adjust? Sure, right? So in response to that requirement, I think Zillow, who gets a lot of heat in our industry, let's be honest about it, they do some good things, do some things I don't love, but that's true of you and my wife and my kid and everybody that I know. So it's okay. But the document basically was trying to say like, hey, we're working together for a short and limited time. Their example was 7 days for the purposes of just showing you property. I don't owe you any other duties beyond that. You don't owe me any other loyalty beyond that. No money is going to change hands for these particular services. Sign it, we can go, right? Which on the face of it, transparently, I don't hate. Like I can understand the functionality of that document, right? I can understand the risks I'm taking as an agent if I go show someone that property and I say on a written paper, hey, you owe me nothing for these duties, and they call you, Michael, the next day and you go buy that property, I'm probably holding the bag, right? But I can see how conversely, like if I go talk to this person and maybe they're, not going through the proper steps to get pre-approved, maybe there's some sort of a personality clash or a stylistic clash. maybe I don't want to work with them either, and I'd rather refer them to you, let them go work with you, and I'll take the referral fee on the back end, right? So I think there's a give and take on both sides. I don't hate it, right? And could I see individual states coming up with a similar document that gets to the spirit of that process that says like, hey, this particular time I'm spending, is not something I want to charge for. I want my duties to be something on the back end. Sure, I could see that happening. Does that take away from the overall pitch of my services? Because that really is kind of baked into the cost that we take on as buyer's agents, because it's travel and gas and time and research and all that other stuff. Sure, but I could see it happening. But as we sit here today, I'm sure not true in every state, but in the state of Colorado and I believe in the state of Missouri, we have pretty darn stringent rules and laws around what forms we can use. You have to be a state approved form, right? And the same conversation as we have when people try to get us to like monkey around with the buyer's agency or seller's agency agreements or the contract to buy and sell. I know that additional provisions section exists, but we can't really monkey with the forms too much. We can't just write our own documents, right? And have it be its own thing. Could an individual brokerage hire a lawyer and have them review those laws and write a similar document? Yeah, I think so. I think based upon my conversations with Carr and some of the information they put out there, I believe that would be functional. Is it worth the squeeze? I don't know, but I think something like that could come up, But that said, I would say maybe that's something we see in the state of Colorado in the future. But honestly, I kind of applaud Zillow's effort to help solve a problem for both the public and the agents, right? But that said, as we sit here today, we really should just be having the conversations we should have been having and weren't, right? And we should be using the documents that we function, right? Because while we can't change the buyer's agency agreement, let's say, there's no rules around how long it has to be or any sort of restrictions we can put around it, right? Like, so if you just want to spend one weekend showing property to kind of feel that relationship out a little bit, you can make it a 7-day document, limit to these properties, and then say, hey, this will, then execute another one when the time comes. Or say, like, hey, if you do end up buying one of these 7 properties, you're going to work with me. So restricted to those units, and then that's why the holdover period exists too. So they can't go in that case. In the case I just set up, Michael, I could go do the same exact tasks, same exact properties get shown. And because I filled it up for 7 days and put, let's say, a 30 or 60-day holdover period, they can't really go to you because they might end up owing 2 commissions in that example, right? So but I could see something like that happen. What was your reaction? I know we talked about this probably, so you're probably a little, have your head around it quite a bit, but what was your reaction to that document? Mine was, I don't hate it. I don't think it was I don't think it sold realtors down the river. I don't think it gave the public a bunch of our work for free or lowered our costs or lowered our value, I should say, sorry.
Yeah.
But, it doesn't apply to us because we live in states that have pretty darn good documents and pretty good protection of the public to not make up stuff, basically,
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. I agree. I do, I do in this example, I do applaud the Zillow Group for coming up with some sort of, solution with short term or long term. I also think it's palatable to a buyer. Number two is that now it's in Colorado and in Missouri both of them have come out respectively and said that's not an approved form. However, I would like to see the Division of Real Estate come up with a form like that would be in place, right? That would be a simple one pager. It's not a full-on agency, type scenario, but it's just an initial kind of like an example is Missouri has this form called an authorization to show. And that form is for a property that is not on the market. It's just a form that's somebody has said, hey, we may be interested in selling it. You may have a buyer. It's a 24-hour deal. It's called an authorization to show. The seller has to sign it, and then the buyer signs it. And then you go show the property. There's no listing agreement. There's no buyer agency agreement. However, if you move forward and formalize it, then you've got to do your transaction broker on both sides, or however you're going to do it, agency or whatever you're going to do, and then formally solidify that relationship on both sides to bring the parties together. But it's just an authorization to show is all it is. All parties know it's not on the market. There's in that example, there's not even compensation, but if an offer was drafted, then there's a box you can check that says compensation would be paid by the seller. So something like that. It's a simple one pager. Now we find that in the second home market a lot because people, 95% of the property owners don't live here.
Sure.
They're not here. They may not be here for 6 months at a stretch, right? So there's got to be that vehicle to let you do that in the event that somebody would come by. However, that being said, I would hope in the spirit of it that both divisions of real estate in both states would see that as maybe a valuable path. And maybe it's a temporary document that says, hey, it's not necessarily an agency agreement, but you will need to figure out the agency for compensation, something like that. But either way,
to go about it, right? Because I mean, because
either way,
there was two big, I guess, a lot of big questions. We said, but
lots
two
of
of
them.
the bigger questions in my mind when these documents came out, or when these rule changes came out, were like, okay, well, what about open houses, right? Because as I read the initial review, there was no like carve out for holding
Right.
an open house, right?
Right.
Which now there is. So now they've addressed that and said, hey, if you have an open house, direction
Right.
to seller, that's fine. But now there still is the sign call situation, right? Because depending on how we have our contracts laid out, or depending on our personal practices, I know a lot of agents, ourselves generally included, there's circumstances where this might change, but we in general do not double end our transactions, right? It's legal in the state of Colorado. You and I just have largely taken the stance of like, hey, I want to help my people. I want those people to help their person. We'll carve it up that way. Now, is there a circumstance we could conjure where we would transaction broker? Sure, right. I'm sure we could have a conversation all day.
Sure.
But but again, do I want to commit to that upfront by signing and executing a buyer's agency agreement and having my contract automatically change like we have here in Colorado?
Right.
Do I have my seller's agency box checked? Right. If someone gives me a sign call and my teammates aren't able to show the property, am I obligated to tell this person no now? Right. So how does that work? And I think there's still some gray area in there.
Yeah.
I think that whether it's a separate document or whether you have some sort of clause that automatically executes like we do in our buyer's agency and seller's agency right now, or right now, because both of those have automatic clauses that unless we check a box altering the language, it says like, hey, in the event that I am representative of both those sides, I automatically transition to a transaction broker.
Exactly.
Right? So could there be some sort of circumstance where that happens, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe that's an additional proviso, or is the separate document? I mean, I don't know. It's kind of, I can see both sides. It's nice to have a really clear, clean, doesn't take them a ton of time to read through a document for an early relationship like that, but it's nice to have kind of one document that's already read and we know backwards and forwards. We don't have to really dance with. It's just another proviso in there.
Right.
I could see it going kind of both ways. I would hope the state of Colorado would consider providing something or some sort of clarity around those circumstances. But yeah, so I mean, we'll see. But it's kind of up in the air. But I just want to kind of talk about the Zillow document. Again, I think the spirit of it, the way I read it, was good. I don't have anything bad to say about the way they went about it. I'm not enough of a legal mind, obviously, to read through it and give it pointers from that perspective. But while we can't use it in Colorado, I do think the spirit of it was something that I think is applaudable. I think they did a good job of putting it out there, and the states that can use it, I'm sure some people will. The states that can't, hopefully they're like looking at it and at least giving a consideration to a similar document being created.
Yeah, I think that a couple other things came out too. So it was really good to get clarity from the National Associations, or NAR. So from NAR with regard to open houses, I think that was the gray area. There's another piece that's a little bit gray right now, and that's when you're doing a video tour for someone who's not there.
It's true.
Because you are demonstrating a property, you are walking them through, you are having discussions on real estate related things. So I think that's gonna fold into showing property and whatnot. The other thing that I think that and let's just from a Zillow perspective, then we can move on, was, they are one of many companies that do offer a lead generation tool to realtors, and realtors invest in that and pay for leads to come in. It could be part of that conversation of, hey, you're a lead, and maybe when the lead signs up, maybe they automatically trigger a document that goes back to that lead, so they know this document's live. And then for the people, whether you're a realtor or non-realtor, that are purchasing leads from a company like Zillow, automatically that comes into effect to have that dialogue, potentially, because it is coming from a third party now. However, in most states now, Zillow is a brokerage. So Colorado and Missouri, they're a full-on brokerage, no different than we are. So I think that's where there's some clarity, some gray area, but absolutely, you're 100% right.
Yeah, and we'll see how that happens, right? Because you went into that on the leasing side, which I do a little bit more than most folks. But you said already, because Zillow has like their own like mini application that you fill out that's free for the customers, which is great, and it does provide some insight into that person's qualifications and what their move-in date is, whether they have pets, stuff like
Right.
material information that I need as a landlord or as a leasing agent helping people find a place to live. But most landlords, and justifiably incorrectly, I think, are still going to want to do like an official background check that pulls credit, criminal, and rental history, and also certifies their income to a certain extent, right? Whether that's them collecting pay stubs or something along those lines,
Right.
right?
Right.
So the Zillow app doesn't quite do that. So I think sometimes there's some danger of it creating an expectation in the customer's mind that may
Right.
not fully align with what the process in that individual area is, right? Now,
Right.
Colorado, we are fortunate. I think there's still some kinks to work on it though, but there is like a universal application in the state of Colorado that landlords are required to accept now. It is a little tough to find, and there's some so I think they could do a better job of making that information out there to the public. Um, but that is kind of a way to work around it. Now it's not free, but you are paying one reasonable fee instead of whatever 5 or 6 or 8 reasonable fees depending on your situation, right? So if you're applying to an apartment, probably not that big of a deal. You're probably applying, either getting approved or denied very, very quickly. But if you're looking for an individual home, sometimes those landlords take a little more time to review applications, and you may not have that time, or you may not be the chosen applicant in that certain situation. So it does make that process a lot easier. So I would encourage people in the state of Colorado to look for that. It is a little tough to find, but if you hunt back enough, you can definitely do it. But yeah, so that's again. So sometimes Zillow like does these things that are, the spirit of them is great. Like I think both those examples are good things, but it's difficult for a national company like that to, even if they wanted to, make everything align with local statutes and rules. So I mean, again, I think they're probably doing their best. I don't know. I don't work for Zillow. I don't pay them anything. They don't pay me anything. But I think that there's probably some misalignment there that can create some potential misalignment with the client's expectations with what actually the process has to be. So,
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, one of the things I'm really proud of our teams, I should say, is, we hit this thing head on, in October of last year. We started the year off in January. From every
mhm,
meeting, we have some sort of dialogue. We have some sort of update, and we have our meetings about every 2 weeks. And what are the things that we're doing to provide more value to our clients? And today, for today's conversation, our clients are our agents, right?
mhm,
And giving them the tools to do his or her job,
mhm,
but also giving them the materials to do their job, and then offering those type of trainings and one-on-ones and coaching and rehearsal. I love the rehearsal example. And we're you and I are invested in that, so that they are top notch across the board. They are comfortable. They can be at their shoulders high, their chest punched out. That knowledge instills confidence. Confidence instills enthusiasm, right? And enthusiasm sells. I think we all know that. So how do we? So in your mind, I think some of the things that we've been doing are really positive. The team is really, I'm really surprised how much they've embraced it
mhm,
from a positive standpoint of what we can do versus this negative that's out there in the media. The media has, I think, got it all wrong, right? And I think our association could probably do a better job of getting their arms around that. But the things that we do is we can just explain things a little bit better,
correct.
right? And all
Mhm,
the value that we offer. And I think a lot of people, they just think that we just go out and we just show this property, or we put somebody in their MLS search, and we've got, I think honestly, you'll probably agree, I've got buyers that have been with me for 3+ years, right? We've shown a lot. We've shown some buyers will come into town. We've shown 40 some properties, right?
yeah.
We don't just sit around and just send them a link. Then it's about evaluating their goals, right? His or her goals are very different. Are they going to be here for 3 years? They're going to be here for 30 years. Is it their final home? Is it their first home? Is it an investment property? And really helping them be in a consultative manner of what they want to do with that property, not just get them under contract to get to a closing. And I think there's a misconception out there about what we do, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a lot of moving parts to that, right? Like I think that and again, and I've never said this on a recording, so this is my first time I say it publicly, so don't sue me, please. But I think that when I first got in the business, and you've been my mentor for pushing 10 years now, right? So when I first got in the business, you had been doing this for about 15 years at the time, I believe, right in that ballpark, right? And I had been doing it for, I'd done some rental stuff, but I haven't done any resale transactions or buy and sell transactions ever. So I had done zero, right? And the way the industry had worked is that regardless of if my client hired you or if my client hired me, you and I were probably going to get paid the same amount of money. Now our duties were the same, our responsibilities were the same, all that good stuff, right? but left to my own devices, my clients probably would have had a much different experience working with you directly than working with me. Right now, I did plenty of collaborating with you. You were very gracious with your time and your effort to make sure that I was trained up properly. And anytime I had questions, we worked together. So fortunately, my clients had a really good experience and it was largely successful throughout, right? But is there any, why did I justify the same cost in the marketplace that you do, right? And again, it's not about time necessarily or about skill, but it's about the quality of experience you can deliver to your client. So I think that there's plenty of opportunities now, and I think most of our agents are pretty excited because conversely, there's probably a given number of the public that would have been willing to work with someone that's a little less experienced and have that person's commission be a little bit lower to leverage their offer, right? So again, there's no standards out there, obviously, but I'm going to use numbers, internet lawyers, just to set examples. Okay. So let's say that the commission was going to be 5% split between the buyers and the sellers, what was being advertised on the MLS, right? Now, if I said, hey, you can work with Michael for 2.5%, or you can work with Andrew for 2 or 1.8, or pick a number, right? Then your offer, while I might be a little less experienced, I have more time to give you, and your offer is a half a point better than every other offer that's going to be identical in every other way, right? If all the terms and timelines are the same, the cost is the same, your offer is by definition half a point better than the competition. Would you want to work with me in that case, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, Mr. and Mr. Buyer, whatever, however, whomever it is, right? So I think that could have been something that anyone could trade on, right? If you're willing to do that. Or conversely, if you could say like, hey, I am very, very busy, but I have been doing this for 25 years. I have a full, my closings close at a higher percentage. I'm able to negotiate seller concessions at a higher rate. I'm able to do this, that, and the other, right? And also, I'll take care of, I buy you a home warranty, provide some back end support for your buyers in the back end. But my commission is, I don't know, pick a number, 3.5%, right? And then there might be a delta potentially that we have to dance with later on down the road, Mr. Buyer. But hey, you're working with me. That's the cost that I demand. Why was it always relatively similar, regardless of experience and skill set, right? And again, I think that there's whether or not you can argue that the driving around was the same, this, that, and the other. That I don't think that less experienced agents don't work as hard, but there's no other job to my mind where that experience level and maybe even certain skill set wasn't rewarded beyond just the ability to acquire more clients, right? That was how experienced agents made more money, is they had a bigger client base, right? So they had past clients that would list and buy, they got more referrals, this, that, and the other. But for their actual skills in general, they were never rewarded financially beyond just having more transactions get done. So, I mean, I think that you're going to have more creative and a more diverse array of offerings on the buyer side and on the seller side, and I think that you need to do a couple things as an agent. You need to establish what your value is, lay out what your skill set is, and lay out what your expectations are and how you like to do business. And I think on the client side, you need to do the same things, right? You need to understand, buyers. There's a real world out there, buyers, where you may have to directly pay your buyer's agent, right? That's the way things on paper are shaping up. Now, will there be potential seller concessions? Will there be other avenues for those funds to be lowered or paid more and more indirectly? I don't know, man. That's all up in the air. There's a lot of back and machinations that are trying to make something like that happen. But I think it's going to be an opportunity for buyers out there to say like, hey, here's what my expectations are. Here's how I like to do business. And I think that the interview process is going to be more robust and more fair now, right? So because we've all at the same time, guys, we've all had those buyers that regardless of what commission was, whether it could have been 10% getting paid you in the commission, they were just never going to do it, man. They were going to drag you around for 3 or 5 years looking at, 2 or 3 or 10 properties a month and never do it. It's never going to be their thing. And you, because of your buyer's agency, are obligated to give them your time. You're obligated, you owe them duties, you owe them responsibility, you owe them fiduciary results. You can't just say no because you're not going to buy something unless that relationship expires, and you of course can. But we kind of hung around forever, right? Is that the kind of person that you really want to work with, right? It's okay for you to establish rules too, and what your expectations are for them, and that we have a more reciprocal relationship instead of just kind of a one-way street, right? And really, I try to treat my clients the same way I try to treat, you, Michael, and our other teammates here, is we're going to have a collaborative relationship to get to the finish line here, right? Like, I'm going to come with services and ideas and advice and professionalism, but you do owe me like a response, and you do owe me some engagement, and you do owe me some legitimate efforts. Like, if I say, hey, the next step in this process is you need to talk to a lender so that we can be prepared to write an offer, and you blow it off and blow it off and blow it off, or you have that one conversation and never deliver documents, then you're not holding up your end of the bargain, right? And conversely, buyers, if you're out there and you're like, hey man, I talked to your lender, I got my documents, I got my pre-approval, I'm ready to go this weekend, and your agent is too busy or unavailable, or you're getting referred to the assistant, or you're not having the experience that you deserve, it's okay to fire that person, or it's okay to have a conversation that's like, hey, this is not what we signed up for, and then move on. So I think it's going to be a more dynamic and well thought out relationship going forward, I think, is the goal anyway. And that's kind of some of the benefits I see out of this. And we can get into the benefits of this overall transition later on. But I do think it's going to be a net positive at the end of the day. There's going to be some pain. There's going to be some folks who unfortunately aren't able to make successfully transition and have to maybe, coach themselves out of the industry. And there's going to be some, until we kind of figure all the moving parts out, some buyers who probably unfortunately aren't able to have representation in the interim until we kind of figure some of the financial things out that we were talking about a moment ago. So it's going to be some pain, man. But eventually I think we'll get there to where we settle into a couple of 2 or 3 ways of doing this that are very efficient for all parties. And I think that we're going to have a more educated public and a more articulate, group of professionals out there. And those 2 things working together are going to have an overall better experience for everybody. I don't think I said anything illegal in there. If I did, I'm sorry. It was
No,
not.
I don't think so.
But yeah, that was kind of laying out
Well,
what I think about in
if you
general.
think about it,
Mhm.
and I agree with everything you said.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, on the listing side of this, there has been some sort of model like this since I've been in the industry, all
Mhm.
the way from all we'll do is put it in the MLS for you, and we won't even take a phone call. Your
Mhm.
phone number is going to be on there, not ours,
Mhm.
right? And all you're paying for is MLS access. That's a business model out there, right?
Mhm.
That comes with a lot of risk,
Oh yeah.
a lot of other stuff. Then there's the full service, and I would say full service plus, right? Where an agent's paying for an upfront appraisal. They've got their photography and video is just off the charts, right? And but for that is X amount of dollars or percentage, right?
Mhm.
Versus we've got, hey, we'll do this for you. What do you want to do, right? And that conversation, that pitch and catch has been happening for decades,
Mhm.
right? And there are a lot of companies that are that way. In the industry, I think we call them more of a discount brokerage. That may not be the right term, but we kind of refer to them as that, where it's very limited services, um, which is kind of what you're talking about. I can see that on the buy side. I can see a very limited service, whatever is the minimum duties required by your state, right? I can see that. I can see an example of one. You brought it up a month ago. Maybe it's just a contract writing only. That's all we're going to do. We're not going to find your inspector. We're not going to deal with your appraisal. All we're going to do is write it up. That's it for dollar amount, as
Mhm.
long as it meets the minimum duties, right, of whatever that looks like. And for that, it's a dollar amount, whatever that is.
Mhm.
Uh, but I think by and large, our full time, full service, even our realtor members, I think we do a fairly decent job of collaborating,
Mhm.
because in our world, there's not like a winner and a loser, right? We have to bring our clients together, right? And at the end of the day, doesn't matter what the property is and what the price is, there has to be a buyer somewhere, whether they're financing it or paying for it or whatever. We have to bring those people together for a successful transaction, right?
Mhm.
And what does that look like? And we're all going to do that a little bit differently from our services. You mentioned one earlier. I got turned on to home warranties before I was even a realtor. When I
Mhm.
bought my first house, my realtor at the time, right? And I've kept those moving all these years, 16, 17 years later, right? I've kept those in place and just renew them every year. And I offer that as part of a package. Whether you're listing with me or whether you're buying with me, whether you want it or not, you're going to get a home warranty at closing, right? And I cannot tell you how many times right after we close, something goes wrong with that house,
Yeah.
right? And it is worth every nickel, right? And I've had them where a lot of people forget your home inspection is only good for one calendar day, right?
Mhm.
Kind of like you get your roof inspected. It's only good for one calendar day, right? And I think people think of that as this warranty or this guarantee, and it's just not, right?
A moment of time, man. It's a single
Right.
moment of time. That's all it
It's a
is.
single moment in time. It's a snapshot, kind of like the appraisal. The appraisal is only good for that physical day.
Yeah.
If the economy twists and turns, something happens the next day, well, the appraisal was still done. It's only good for that calendar day, right?
Mhm.
So the point is that I've always said that we earn our income from contract to close. We
Mhm.
don't earn it by putting a sign in the yard. We don't earn it by driving around. We earn it from contract to close. And it is every single day there's something going on in that transaction in those
Mhm.
people's lives, right? And it's kind of like when you go to closing, I think you and I were at a class one time and the instructor talked about the big breakup. It's like we had this amazing relationship and all of a sudden we closed and we walked away. It was like, well, it's kind of like we broke up. And we're not
Yeah.
talking every day. We're not seeing each other all the time, right? So I think that people forget about that. Now, that being said, with in our business, I would argue it's very emotional, especially if it's going to be an owner-occupied property
Mhm.
or you're selling as an owner-occupant. It is an emotional transaction, right? I don't know if it's as emotional if it's the investor buyer, the fix and flipper, the person buying for shorter long-term rental. I think it's more of a mathematical conversation. But getting back to the collaborative environment, I think is where we're going to win. And
Mhm.
I can give you the moment in time in the Colorado market when we lost the human factor of real estate. And it was in '08 and '09. Remember, fuel prices were like $6 a gallon, right?
Mhm.
And the electronic contract software launched. Because before then we had to either deliver the contract to the other agent on the other side, which means we had to do something with it. We had to physically deliver it, right? As well as that earnest money that we didn't do them in wires at that time. So we physically went to real estate offices to meet the other agent or the title company, right?
Mhm.
And when that happened, well, we didn't have to necessarily do that. That link left the transaction, and it very much over time turned into a lot of text messaging, a lot of emailing, less phone calls, right? um, and there was a moment in time when that changed. Now, as amazing as those contract softwares are today, and we use them in Colorado and Missouri,
Oh yeah.
as amazing as doing wire, as amazing as doing electronic signature for buyers and sellers, it's amazing to have all those tools, but it has taken away the realtor relationship a
Mhm.
little bit. And I think that this is going to get us talking again. We're going to have to collaborate to get transactions done.
Yeah, you're gonna have to more of a conversation than just do you have any other offers, which is the
Right.
extent of a lot of our conversations at this point, you know. And I do think
Right.
there's something to be said for like because on a similar note, right? It was probably a COVID victim, you know. I mean, they were happening less and less around the time anyway. But I mean, honestly, like the face-to-face close where buyer and seller come together and execute documents at the closing table is all but gone. Like it's the very, very rare circumstance for me. I would say less than 10% get together and close together, right? So now you're seeing more and more transactions where like the buyer and the seller never see each other for the entire process, right? So I mean, and again, I still it's almost a point where like it's kind of like a reminiscing thing for me. Like when it does happen, it's nice because you can see that in there's even been combative transactions before where we had our bumps around inspection or whatever. But they come together now and oh hey yeah, when you got to kind of jiggle the handle when you're closing the door. The garage does this thing. Here's how you handle it, right? Things that aren't like flaws, really, but are just like the character of the house doesn't really get articulated anymore. And so I think that because they're like this, faceless, nameless opposition, like that was what they kind of end up being. I think these transactions have a tendency to become more combative throughout the process, right? Because buyers forget that just a week ago they were willing to compete with 10 other people to buy this house, and sellers forget that just 5 years ago they had inspection items for the last person they bought the house from. So it's interesting. So I think there's a general I don't know relationship loss in the real estate transaction over the last 15-ish years or so, right? And I'm hoping this can reintroduce that a little bit, right? I'm hoping that like the buyer and the seller, or sorry, the buyer and their agent, the seller and their agent should have a really solid relationship that's going to come out of this, right? And because you're going to ask those more probing questions. The seller is going to ask, guys, if you haven't been asked this question yet, I'm surprised, first of all. if you maybe, but you're going to get asked, should I offer a buyer's agent commission to the other side? What does that look like, right? And what are the give and takes? And there are pros and cons, guys. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that we should always do it or we should never do it, which I think is kind of if you read any realtor message board, people have a lot of spirited opinions on this. It's like anything else in this transaction. There's going to be pros and cons that you need to weigh as a seller and understand how you want to market your home in the most effective way to get to your goals, right? And on the buyer side, we need to establish like, hey, there is a real world where you pay me. That's probably that's probably how we should operate going forward. I'll do my best to secure it, right? From, in the form of a seller concession or whatever. But we need to figure out what you can afford and what services I'm willing to align with that, budget, right? And that relationship should be tight, right? So, and I think it's going to tighten up the screws there. And again, will some agents say no to some clients? Will some buyers try to do things by themselves, just like sellers have been trying to do them by themselves for a very long time? Sure, I don't know if, to your point, it's a very spirited and very emotional transaction. Every state has their own rules. I just got to see a Missouri contract for the first time in a while recently. I appreciate how short that bad boy is. It's very, very cool. Our Colorado contract is like 5 times as long. So there's a lot of moving parts, guys, and I think that a professional on representing both sides is highly effective and highly rewarding. I do it for a reason. But I mean, hey, it's free country, baby. You should be able to do it on your own if you want to. And it's going to be everyone weighing their own pros and cons, and us as professionals have to find our place in the marketplace, right? We can't just assume that everyone's going to use this anymore at a 90% rate. And we can't just assume, that we're going to get paid relatively close to a relatively tight range, regardless of our skill set. Carve a niche for yourself. Figure out what you like to do in the industry out there, agents, buyers agents, sellers agents, guys who do both, whatever, gals who do both, and do what you like to do. Like maybe you don't like getting your car and driving all over the countryside for 3 years to be told, oh, hey, sorry, I decided not to buy something or whatever the case is, right? I don't mind driving. I do. I put plenty of miles in my car. I ride everyone I'm off. It's cool. But maybe you're not that person. Maybe you want to keep a tighter network, in a tighter area, and you want to identify, a niche in the market that you want to work from. Maybe you make a little less money per transaction. Maybe you do more. Maybe it's the inverse. Maybe you carve a niche out where you can earn a little bit more commission and get paid directly from your buyer, but you're just doing less transactions.
Right.
You have an opportunity here to make this job much more of your own. I think one of the big pitches to realtors out there is like, oh, you make your own hours. You're your own boss. You own your own business, which is all technically true. But if we were all functionally in basically identical ways, then how true is it? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you look at lawyers, like they all have law degrees and they all, have passed the bar in their respective states, but they all don't do the same stuff, man. Like, Scott, our lawyer, he's not doing the Law and Order thing, arguing criminal cases. He's not. Everyone's got their own thing. The guys over at Carr are not doing, divorce cases. Like everyone's doing what they want to do. So I can see a world flash forward 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now where real estate looks like, hey, Andrew's a realtor that does ABC. That's what he does. What he likes to do. It's what he's good at. That's what his clients like to do for him. That's all well and good, right? We don't really have that nowadays, right? We have like, oh, well, we have commercial and we have residential, and that's kind of it, right? Like, it's like, are there people who do more land and people who do less land? Sure. Are there people who do more, manufactured homes and less manufactured homes? Sure. People who do more condos and there's luxury and there's this, that, and the other, but they're not really that different. And you wouldn't say no. Like if you're like a downtown Denver condo guy, and then someone says, hey, we list my $5 million mansion in Cherry Hills, you're going to say yes.
Right.
You're not just like, oh no, I'm a condo guy. It's not what I do. You're going to say yes, right? So you may need to look inward and figure out where your skill set aligns and what you enjoy doing, and then start marketing to that skill set. So I think there's an opportunity for this to be a really, really, really good thing for everybody. And it's about just kind of seizing the opportunity, making what you will, right? Like the rules are the rules. The game doesn't change just because the rules change, right? It's still real estate. It's still a relationship business. Our job is still to serve our clients the best of our ability, and just figure out now. I think you have a better opportunity to do that because you can really play to your individual skill set instead of trying to be all things to all people.
You could not have summarized that better. I just wrote myself a note about I've been saying for decades, we're in the people business, you're not in the house business. And
Yeah.
this goes right back to what you just said about the relationship. So, hey, as we're wrapping up here,
Mhm.
um, kind of shift gears for a minute. You're
Yeah.
my resident sports dude. So tell me, we had an NFL draft. We've got the Rockies playing. We've got the Avalanche doing their thing. I know some of your Oregon Ducks, were pulled
Yeah,
to
man.
big
They're
companies.
they're
So
coming.
tell
Yeah.
me
So I
about
mean,
it.
I think. Yeah, I think it was great. It was. I've been advocating for Denver to do an all Oregon draft for several years now. So they gave me 2 of 7 rounds. That's pretty good. Obviously, Bo Nix is the one that's making a ton of noise. He had played well his first year at Auburn and kind of struggled after that, and then came to Oregon and really hit a renaissance and has been playing really really well. So I'm really excited to see him come here. My understanding is that there was a lot of dialogue between Coach Payton and Dan Lanning at Oregon, and they seem to be, both seem to think that Nick's skills will align really, really well here. I think that, and again, I've just watched these guys play a lot of football. I think, yeah, I think that getting, the receiver that we got there in the fourth round. I mean, he early on was projected to be like the fifth or seventh receiver off the board. So getting him like the 200th player almost was really great. So I think Denver did really well. Obviously, time will tell, man. Quarterbacks have like a 30 or 40% return at draft in the first round. So, we'll see how that plays out. But I'm really excited. I think that the city seems really excited, which is really great. Kind of see how that transitions. Obviously, the Nuggets have they played really well the first a couple rounds. They're struggling here against Minnesota, which is a team that gave us a lot of trouble last year too. It was a really competitive series, and they've jumped all over us, man. They kind of ripped the first couple games down, and well, hopefully they can rebound here. But Jokic just got his third MVP in 4 years, which is he's just a super super impressive guy. Probably the most important person to Colorado sports since Peyton Manning or John Elway, even right in that era. I mean, it kind of more has that John Elway. He was, drafted here, played here his entire career. And really great to see him obviously have that individual success. The team's had a lot of success the last couple of years. I mean, it's you're doing well when your fan base is disappointed that you're only in the Western Conference Finals. So really really great stuff. Or semi, sorry. Really great stuff there. And then the Rockies are the Rockies, man. I think they're on pace to lose a record like 124, 125 games this year. But hey, man, it's the most fun ballpark in the states. A ton of time. Go out there and support them. Tickets are cheap. It's the cheapest beer in the city before first pitch. And we'll see what they can do. I do. I think the ownership gets a lot of heat. I don't know them super well personally, but I've been able to run into them a few times, kind of around the city, and they own the McGregor Square building. They're good guys who want to win, So it's just kind of hasn't really come together for our Rockies since kind of after they first launched there when they made that World Series run. But we'll see, man. It's at any rate, it's a great time to be in the city. It's a fun team. It's a fun place to be. Fun game to watch. It's America's pastime for a reason. But yeah, and then on I would be remiss if I didn't mention the grappling side of things. So the United States, we just had our Olympic trials a couple weeks ago. So we established all the current Olympians and Olympic trials champions have already been established. The women are incredibly good. They already have qualified all 6 of their weights, so they're all of them are Olympians ready to go. On the men's side, on freestyle, they got to get a couple more done. So that's all going on today, actually, as we speak. So basically the way the Olympics works for wrestling is you have to either have a returning world medalist or do so well in like a series of tournaments, right? You have to place at a
Wow.
given level in a series of tournaments in the Olympic year to qualify the weight class. Otherwise, you may be an Olympic trials champion, but not Olympian because your country didn't qualify for the weight class. So there's 6 weights for everybody. So the men have 2 more to qualify. And it sounds like they got a shot. The smallest weight class is 57 kilos. This a person named Spencer Lee is our potential rep there. He's been a powerhouse forever. He's a 3-time national champion in college, and was a couple-time world or a junior level, like age level world champion. So he's got to go out there and get top 3. I think that starts today for his weight class, and then yeah. So then we'll see. So there's another another weight class. Oh gosh, I think it's 65 has to get qualified still. And so that's gonna go down today as well. There he was also a three-time national champion in college.
Mhm.
So we'll see how well he does. He's got a tough road. He's got returning world champ on his side of the bracket. He's got this guy from Mongolia that has like beaten two or three world medalists in the last year.
Wow.
So he's got a tough road, and he's got to go place top three, and all those guys are on his side of the bracket. So it's probably getting too deep, but the way it works, and most of you guys who watch high school and college, where like if you lose, you get dumped into the consolation bracket, and you can kind of wrestle your way back through and try to get top three. The way it works international styles, there's a thing called repechage. So basically, if you wrestle and you lose to somebody, you wait to see if that person makes the finals, and then whoever the people in the finals are, whomever they beat, get put into a bracket that wrestles for third. So you
Oh,
don't automatically get another shot, right? So if you lose to someone who loses the next round, you're done. So he's got hopefully his first round match should go pretty well, I hope. But then he's from basically the round of 16 through the finals, he's got some dogs to work through. So we'll see how that goes. But that's really exciting. And then there's a big jiu-jitsu event today called Who's Number One that's being held in Houston, Texas. So there's it's kind of the last big event before this big, huge tournament. It's held every other year called ADCCs, which is like the Olympics for jiu-jitsu. So a
huh.
lot of stuff going on today, guys. So it should be really fun. A lot of Colorado connections in wrestling and jiu-jitsu because we have the Olympic Training Center here down in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So excited to go support your guys. Kamal Bay is on the Greco side trying to qualify his weight class, which I believe he has one more match to win. If he does, he'll get third and he'll qualify his weight class for the Olympics. And he's been a training center guy for 10 years. So he's I think he's originally from Illinois, but much like we did you, Michael, we'll take him now and call him a Coloradan.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so he's an incredible wrestler, great Greco guy. Just it's tough for the United States and Greco. So hopefully he finishes out the job today. But yeah, so a lot going on, a lot of Colorado connections with all of it. But yeah, we'll see, man. But yeah, Avs and Rockies on Saturday. And then if you guys are down to near to watch the game anyway, I myself in Rand and Voorhees will be holding open a condo at McGregor Square. So we'll be there from 1 to 3. Get out of there in plenty of time for you guys to catch a beer before the game, but come by and check us out.
That's awesome. The
Yeah.
amount of stats in your brain is wild. The
Yeah, there
input
was a
that
world where I was a sportscaster for sure. So
the
yeah.
input that you take on a daily basis is mind blowing. That's
I do
amazing.
spend some time selling houses, guys, too. So don't, it's not all I do. We'll see, but
I love it. Well,
yeah.
that's great. So listen, I hope all of you have an amazing weekend. Have an awesome Mother's Day with your families, and whatnot. And we'll catch you guys on our next Fun Fact Friday.
Cool. Have a good day, guys. We'll see you.
Awesome. Very cool.